and welcome to our webinar about the importance of prototyping for innovating. My name is Julia, and I will be your host for today's session. Please go over to the chat box and let us know from where you're joining us today. It's actually a very early, rainy, cloudy morning in Seoul, South Korea, where I'm based right now. So yeah, please let us know from where you're joining us today. You should be, let me see if you're able to use the chat. Yeah, you should be able to use the chat. Yeah, okay, I can see some comments already coming in. San Diego. Nice to meet you, James. Hi, John. Please make sure to select the everyone option when you're sending your comments. You should be able to write like that. Hi. So we have people joining us from Mexico, from Seattle, Australia, even from Nigeria. Hi, Becky, from the United Emirates. Hi, from India. San Francisco. Hi, Minneapolis. Okay. Great. So while people are still joining in, like I was saying, my name is Julia, and I will be hosting today's webinar with Fetch. Now let's meet today's speakers, shall we? Okay. So Fredo Tan, our head of growth, will be giving us a short introduction to ProtoPie and also sharing with us some of our latest updates. Fredo, would you like to say hi?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our very first webinar of 2023. Yeah, and excited to do this with all of you.
Awesome. Thank you, Fredo. Today's session features Fetch, America's leading consumer loyalty platform. It's with great pleasure that I introduce to you Taiki Ishii, Senior Product Designer at Fetch. Taiki, would you like to say hi, to say a few words?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for joining. Thank you for having me, ProtoPie team. I'm super excited to share a thing or two, and hopefully I'm able to teach at least one or two things throughout this. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Taiki. Okay, then let's shortly cover today's agenda so we know what's coming today. In the first part, like I was saying, Fredo will be giving us a short introduction about ProtoPie for those who are not that familiar with ProtoPie, and also sharing with you some of our latest releases and news. And then we will talk about the significance of prototyping for innovating new experiences. And at the end of our webinar, we have a live Q&A session to answer all of your questions. I would encourage you to ask questions in the Q&A window to make sure that we make the most out of today's webinar, right? So please use the Q&A feature from Zoom to ask any questions you might have, and we will cover them at the end in our live Q&A session. So yeah. Okay, then, without further ado, I think we can begin. Fredo?
All right. I'll share my screen, right? So
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Great. So I'll cover briefly what ProtoPie is for the ones that are new to ProtoPie or not as familiar with ProtoPie as we are. So ProtoPie stands for prototyping as easy as pie. So it's a high fidelity prototyping tool enabling designers like you and your teams to really explore, realize, and communication any interaction design idea that you have with ease and without code. So it's what we're trying to do is enabling digital product innovation through high fidelity prototyping across software and hardware. So when I say across software and hardware, we're talking about some of these interactions that you see on the screen. Like these would be some of the complex ones that you can think of. And with ProtoPie, you can do them pretty easily. So think of multi-screen interactions that involve voice. Interacting with phones might be something that you're familiar with, but how about interacting with multiple phones and multiple phones interacting with each other? Or interactions with hardware like steering wheels or physical controllers. So ProtoPie, the way we see ProtoPie, it's more than just a prototyping tool. We really like to see it as an interaction design tool for any kind of digital product across the spectrum. So yes, we do cover smartphones, of course, but you can go a lot more advanced and a lot more complex than that. So from smartphones on one end, you can have smart appliances and automotive experiences on the other end. So you can go advanced as you want. And with ProtoPie, we've been able to simplify all of this. So with the conceptual model that you see here, you can create any interaction that you imagine. And the way it works in ProtoPie is that any interaction consists of objects, at least one trigger, and at least one response. And with the variety of triggers and responses that we have available, you can create whatever interaction that you want to create. You can go as simple and you can go as advanced as you want. So that's ProtoPie in a nutshell. But I would like to share with you what's new. We've been working on some updates, new features and improvements, and this is one of them. So these are ProtoPie's user testing features that run in ProtoPie Cloud. And with this, you can test your prototypes with your end users, and you can observe the way they interact with your interactions in real time. We'll go into more detail in the blog article that we have, so you can find some more information there. And for now, this is in closed beta for some of our ProtoPie enterprise users. And the other one is the QR code scanner. This is part of ProtoPie 7.6. As some of you might know already, ProtoPie has a camera feature. So the QR code scanner capabilities on top of that camera feature. So you can scan a QR code, you can then open a URL, as you're probably used to already, but you can also read values from a QR code. And you can then create interactions based on the values that you just read. So it's a very powerful feature, and it does open up a lot of possibilities for you as a designer. And this is already available. So if you update to 7.6, you can start using this, and also more information in the blog article that we have. All right.
Thank you, Fredo, for giving us these updates about what's new in ProtoPie. Yeah, I would like to welcome Taiki on the stage to talk to us about how they innovate with prototyping at Fitch. Taiki, the stage is yours.
Awesome, thank you. Let me share real quick. Okay, first of all, thank you to the ProtoPie team, the ProtoPie community, all of you for joining today. I'm honored to be able to share some things with you. Fredo, thanks for sharing those updates. Super exciting seeing how much growth the ProtoPie product and team have had. And I'm just excited to be a part of it just as a user and an advocate. So today I want to talk about innovating with prototypes, right? I think throughout my career, I've gone through projects now that involve a lot of prototyping, and from an early stage, and how you can leverage that as a tool to better your case, to better your product at the end of the day. So a little about me. My name is Taiki. I usually tell people it's like Nike with a T. That seems to resonate well with people, but hello, nice to meet you. I'm a senior product designer at a company called Fetch. I'll talk a little bit more later about what Fetch is and what Fetch does. But I've been there for a little over 2 years at this point. It's been a a crazy ride so far, but I love it. And I can't wait to keep it going. That's my LinkedIn tag right here on the bottom. Please feel free to reach out to me at any point. I would love to connect with all of you and just talk about design, prototyping, or anything in general. So feel free to reach out at any point. Today's presentation can sort of be split up into two different parts. The first part is a lot more about approaching innovation. How do you do it? What is innovation? How do you structure yourself to be successful in this world of innovating new products? And then on the latter half, we'll talk about an experience that we recently went through and redesigned called Fetch Snap experience, and the learnings from that and how we went about that, both successes and some setbacks that we had to maneuver through. So first, approaching innovation. I think the first and foremost, most important thing you have to do is define what innovation is. You hear companies all the time talk about, we're an innovative company, individuals talking about we're doing this, we're doing that, including myself. But I think it comes down to defining the pillars of innovation. And I think there's 4 of them, to be exact. I think the first is generating unestablished ideas, right? So veering away from the norm, what the industry standard is at the moment, and kind of going your own way with things. But on top of that, that idea has to be desirable, usable, and simple at the end of the day. And I think if you cover those 4 pillars of innovation, you sort of veer into that space. On top of that, I think it's very important to notice and recognize the difference between sort of what you go into when you recognize that you're in an innovative space or innovative atmosphere versus a traditional, maybe more simple approach or simple project that you may have gone through in the past. I think the most important thing is understanding that there requires a different level of fidelity, just a high intense level of fidelity to trying to create something innovative, trying to create something new. And then on top of that, communicating that at a high level, just to make sure that all of your stakeholders, your whole team, the users understand what you're trying to accomplish. I think understanding that you're in this innovative space is very important, but to do that, I think it requires one specific thing, and it's to understand the different types of projects there are. I like to break down the types of project into 3 different spaces, and those 3 being iterate, compete, and innovate. Iterate essentially means that there is something in your product already that exists, right? And you want to iterate on top of it. These could be minor improvements, such as polishing UI or just adjusting the user needs and making sure that those are covered, and maybe getting rid of some pain points that may be there. But because there's a home for it already in your product or company, these end up being smaller changes. The second is a compete type of project. What that is you recognize that a competitor of yours or anybody in the industry is doing something different. They've already done so, and their users have adapted to it already. And so at that point, you have sort of this confidence level going in that if you do make a similar change to that, there's already a proof of concept out there. There's users that are acclimated to it that may be doubling up on your platform as well. And so being able to use that as sort of a way to minimize risk is another type of project. And then the third, and the one I want to focus on the most, is an innovate type of project here. I think the biggest thing about an innovate project is nothing is guaranteed. I think understanding that you can do everything you can, whether it be research, testing, usability testing, and put hours and hours into that, but still end up short because users just couldn't get acclimated to it, couldn't understand it, stuff like that. I think that's all a possibility in the realm of innovation. And so understanding that is a big piece of this. And I think when you look at all 3 of those, the most important thing is to understand that maintaining a balance is the most crucial. I'm talking about innovation a lot here today, but having a nice balance of all 3 is, I think, where people succeed the most and thrive the most. So earlier I talked about how the process changes when you recognize that you might be part of an innovate type project, right? So one of the biggest things that I've noticed in my process changing is how early and often I get into prototyping and ProtoPie. Like I said, there requires an intense and the high level of fidelity to try and communicate your designs and telling the why of what you're doing, or the why of why you're doing what you're doing. And so just getting into ProtoPie as early as possible and creating these prototypes becomes this massive, massive leverage point for you and your team to be able to get behind you and kind of create this product together from the ground up. And there are other benefits as well. So the first big one is the feedback quality that you're going to get. When you create a prototype so early in the process, every single time you show it to someone and able to get feedback, that feedback becomes more meaningful, right? And as a designer, that is the bread and butter. Like that is what you want at the end of the day, a meaningful feedback that's actionable and you can kind of iterate off of the previous iteration. So that's one part of things. The second is storytelling. I think there's sort of an abstract concept of being able to compare two experiences that aren't like one another, right? So oftentimes my coworkers will hear me say, I wanted to mimic the experience of this, and this being some sort of real world experience that you may or may not have gone through, but to be able to compare elements of something that you go through in your day-to-day life or just something that you've experienced before in person, and then portray that on a screen is something that you could use as leverage and is very valuable in the entire process of innovating something. And then the third is rapid testing. Rapid testing, just the ability to test even at an informal level, just to see if your prototype is working, to see if the user understands what you want them to do next or not. Oftentimes I'll ask my parents, my mom and dad, do you think this works? What would you do next? And if it's not working, that's my fault. If it is, great. But just being able to ask anyone that comes by about the prototypes because you have one so early on is a blessing and something that is extremely beneficial here. With this being said, though, there are drawbacks to prototyping so early. With any decision, there comes some drawbacks. These are things I've learned the hard way and spent countless hours trying to fix and adjust, but hopefully this saves some time for you. The first point is always name your layers, triggers, responses, formulas. This is something you've probably heard before as a designer or really just documentation in general. Something that you want to move left moves right for some reason. And figuring that out could take a minute or 10 minutes. And documenting everything and always naming your layers and everything like that becomes a very helpful debugging tool at the end of the day. The second is to be cautious of start delay usage. It's funny how you can kind of think of prototypes as two different ways you could go. The first is what I like to consider a timing-based prototype. So everything is based on a start point and an end point, right? There's not necessarily an interaction pattern that you have to follow. It's more so trying to get a video at the end of your prototype and showing stakeholders that. On the other side of things, there is a fully functioning prototype, and that's where you're able to interact fully and it mimics the prod experience or the production experience. And I think that pushing yourself to really push for the fully fledged functional prototype is a hard transition, but it requires you to think on a deeper level and a more experienced level. And so that'll only help you at the end of the day. The third, this is a common practice even in just designs or Figma even, but creating a playground as a sandbox file versus a final file, I think is extremely useful thing. I oftentimes find myself trying to think of new ideas as I go and design something out. And so creating a new scene in ProtoPie and going from there becomes a very useful habit of mine. And then lastly, communicating your progress, even to the point of maybe even over communicating that progress and making sure that everyone is on the same page at the same time will only help elevate your experience, smooth it out, gain that momentum for the team, and continue going with that journey of creating something new and exciting. On a similar note, I coined this section of the presentation ProtoPie Party. It's sort of just a concept to tell users about, or tell everyone that the whole team should be in ProtoPie and understand where files are, understand where the prototypes are at, and be able to click through them themselves at all times from a very early point. What that does is it essentially just, like I said, makes the momentum of the team even stronger, makes the chemistry of the team even stronger. And at the end of the day, what the team is trying to do is collectively create the best product possible within the ideas of each individual. There's obviously other benefits for everyone being on the same page so early and in ProtoPie. Like I said, the team solution becomes one of them. Arguably, the most important one might be the development ideation, and it might not even be just constricted within development. What this means is that, for example, there's a million ways you can make a rectangle go from the left side to the right side in ProtoPie. Similar in development, similar in data, similar in QA, product management. There's a million ways to solve one problem. But oftentimes there is one best way to go about things, or maybe one way that becomes the best situation for you and your team. And being able to think about that from a very early stage, for not only for myself as a designer in ProtoPie, but for the developers, for the PM, for the QA, for the data analysts, everyone involved. I think it becomes a seed planted early on, and helps throughout the whole process, and continues that momentum throughout, because everyone is contributing their ideas and gaining that momentum as you go. The third is handoff efficiency. On a similar note, when I'm handing off my designs to a developer, it's not so that I tell them, this is what I decided, this is what I'm doing, this is how we should do it. It's more so that we've agreed upon an idea that we both collectively decided upon. It's more so values and a conversation back and forth to try and figure out how we can most efficiently do this. So I'll take a quick break there and take a sip of water. And switch gears into a little bit more about the Fetch experience and what I was able to go through and learn about while creating something new. So Fetch is a consumer shopping app. Essentially, what we do is on every purchase you make as a user, you can get points back. Points back meaning you can redeem those for rewards or gift cards on our app. And it becomes a win-win situation for both the user and the client and us. The Snap experience on that is a core feature within Fetch, where you go through the cameras, take a photo of your receipt, we recognize what's on that receipt, and we're able to give you the right amount of points back. So when you hear about Fetch, when you hear about Snap experience, that's sort of what I'm referring to. We recently went through a redesign of the Snap experience, and that's what I want to talk about here today. So for better or for worse, the goal of this project of redesigning the camera or the Snap experience was very vague. The goal in mind was to create an experience that elicited the excitement of our new scan and match technology. We had a third-party dependency for scanning and matching that we brought in-house. And so during that transition, it was worth the redesign of updating the camera, making sure that it had modern UI, modern UX, modern interactions, and stuff like that. But one of the most important things is understanding how to break that vagueness down, right? So we started out with what we knew. The first and maybe the most important thing was that we knew core experiences are very, very fragile. Using the Fetch app almost requires you to go through the camera very often. And so we understood that we would be adjusting and sort of changing this core experience, and users are hesitant to change. We know that. And so we understood the importance of making sure the user knew what we were going to do, knew what they should do in the next step. The second point of what we knew was that this was going to be falling under an Innovate type project. Understanding the vagueness of the goal in mind, and then just figuring out that there's a lot of vagueness all around as well, whether it be metrics, whether it be the design we were going to go to. That was the second thing we knew. And the third, ironically, was that nothing was wrong or broken with the current UX of the Snap experience. And so that made for an interesting conversation about where can we make the most impact? What should we do? What can we do? What should we choose to try and improve? And so after deliberate conversation with the team and sort of debates all over, these three are the points that we came up with. And so the first was to simplify the UI. On the left side, you'll see where we started and what we were starting with. You could see that the UI felt a little sporadic. The design language was a little inconsistent. There was a lack of usability in terms of the submit button being on the right side, which is notoriously known as a hard area to reach for users in their hands. But there was sort of this miss in the UI simplicity of things and how to modernize that in the previous version. The second point was to create a sticky experience. It felt old. You could feel it going through. There wasn't as much feedback. Like I said, the colors and the UI didn't actually match up. I'm a firm believer in including multiple different types of interaction patterns while you go through a specific flow, just to be able to take advantage of them. As long as you can convey that and make sure that the user knows to do those interactions, I think it becomes a powerful tool for you to leverage as a designer. And the third point we were focusing on was to focus on retention. Because of the vagueness of that goal, there were areas where we weren't sure where to attack this, where to make sure that we could define success for this project. And so what we chose to do, and what aligned with the company goals at the moment too, was retention. Success in this project meant users understood how to go about this and retain better than the previous UI. So earlier in the presentation, I shared how prototyping can help leverage your storytelling abilities. And as a designer, that is a key part to getting stakeholder buy-in, making sure users get excited about that. I come from a Japanese background. Both my parents are Japanese. I'm fully Japanese. And I was fortunate enough to go to Japan every summer growing up. They were the best times. And during the summer, there are Japanese summer festivals. And in those, there's a game called Kingyo Sukui. And what that translates to is goldfish scooping, essentially. What happens is you go up to the host, there's a tub of water and goldfish just swimming around. Once you pay the host a sum of money, they will hand you two things. The first thing is a bowl. The second thing is a plastic tool that has sort of paper wrapped around the circular part of it. And the simplified goal and the task that you have to accomplish is to scoop as much goldfish as you can. And the amount that you scoop into your bowl is what you get to take home as a pet. And this is one of those things that you will definitely have to experience at one point in your life, just to experience the full breadth of it. But as I explain it, there's a specific level of finesse, there's a specific level of touch and motion that you have to go through to account for all of the elements here, whether it be the motion of the water or the fragility of your paper at that moment, or the weight of the plastic tool, or how hard or heavy the fish might be. There's so many different elements that come into play. And while it could be difficult for you at times or at the very beginning, there's this level of addiction and passion that makes you want to go back and play even more times once your paper is bricked. And so that was something that I was able to leverage in the story that I was able to tell about creating this new experience, and how this would leverage, or how this would translate into users wanting to come back, users getting passionate and wanting to remembering this experience. And so, like I said, storytelling becomes a big part of this, and it's awesome to feel these different thoughts come into mind, whether they work or not. But yeah, this was something that I thought of during the time. So some of the early iterations, you can see on the left side there, that was sort of the concept that we went with. You could see the similarities between goldfish scooping and this submit interaction, where a user would press and hold the bottom button, or the snap button is what we call it, and drag that into the bigger circle up there and release in that specific range. In the middle there, you'll see my playground with a million scenes. It felt like scenes. It felt like, but again, a nod to just having a separate file for your playground and being able to play with different interactions there. Something that we focused in on before releasing to a few amount of users was what copy we would place on the screen to let them know that they were ready to submit, let the user know that they were ready to submit. We tried out a bunch of different copy, and we ultimately ended up deciding that hold and slide to submit was simple enough, and that the user should understand this at the end of the day. And so we released it to a few users. And what ended up happening was nobody understood it. This is one of those moments that humbles you as a designer, but without taking just too many steps back, you refresh and think about what you could do differently, right? And so being able to test was part of this, and learning this early on was so helpful. Some of the learnings through this experience too is that you test fast and fail fast. Because we were able to get that prototype early, and because the team was able to collectively come together early on, we were able to find out that that iteration is not going to work. Only about half of the users understood it, even out of the few users that we tested with. The second idea, or the second learning, was that ironically, the first idea, and probably your most confident one just to begin with, might not always work. A humbling experience, to say the least, but don't take that as a shot. Just kind of keep going, iterate off of it, and learn from what's not working. And the third is to break down what's not working. And exactly what we figured out was that users were so hyper-focused on the camera side of things, and sort of all of their thoughts went to the camera, that they didn't see anything pop up on screen. And so they couldn't read anything because they didn't see it. They were just looking for the submit button in the bottom right that you saw earlier to pop up, which never did. So after going back to the lab and just figuring out as a team what we would do going forward, we came up with this solution. And the solution was to momentarily grab the attention of the user by placing an overlay over the screen. We had to add additional logic and make sure that we prompted this at the right time and when the user was ready to submit. But grabbing the screen, placing some copy at the top saying slide to submit, drag the snap button into the circle, submit receipt, and then throwing a little bit of an interaction or an animation at the bottom representing how to do so. This helped us a ton, and this is what we went forward with. And just to speak on to the behind the scenes a little bit, this prototype was probably the most fun I've had in ProtoPie so far. What we were able to do was use a touchdown trigger here and assign a variable or a formula of touch Y to that touchdown trigger. We needed that because we needed to understand where the user's finger was and where the circle or the snap button was at all times, right? So by assigning that touch of Y and detecting where that Y point was at all times, we were able to assign a range to that and figure out when they were within the submit range and when they were out of the submit range. And based on that interaction, we could show which state was appropriate in that specific area. So on the right side, you see the submit ready state or release to submit. And once they release, and we added another touch up trigger below the touchdown, but once you touch up, we would start a specific lottie file that transitioned you into the next screen as well. Like I said, ProtoPie has a depth of prototyping that you can't get with other tools such as Figma, and Touch Y, a preset formula in ProtoPie already, was one of them. Like I said, I had a ton of fun using this and creating this, and I hope to be able to use more of the formulas going forward. To speak on the success and just kind of metric side of things, once we release this, we're at 100% of iOS users, and Android is quickly ramping up. But we saw an increase in first snap success. So what that meant was when users saw this for the first time versus the previous UI for the first time, this version was performing much better than the previous one. Similar to overall snap success, which is similar to the first snap success. After the first receipt that the user snaps, how well do they fare? Like I said, we added additional logic to make sure that we didn't show this and take over the user screen every single time. So after an X amount of successful submits, we would lay back and pull back a little bit on the UI and how much we showed. And that seemed to be increasing as well. And lastly, what we were focusing on in terms of retention, we were able to increase that as well. And it's been an amazing ride so far. There was definitely setbacks and some tough moments and long hours, but it was definitely one of the most fun projects. And I'm grateful for my team, for the team that I worked with, from everyone, and the designers I was able to pair with on the team. But to wrap things up, thank you very much for listening. Yeah, like I said, feel free to connect with me at any point. So on LinkedIn, reach out to me. I'd love to talk to all of you about whatever it may be. So with that, I'll pass it back to Julia.
Thank you, Taiki, for a great presentation. Let me share my screen again. Yeah, it was great to see how you approach innovation at Fetch, and thank you for walking us through the whole design and prototyping process. Okay, then, like I promised at the beginning of this webinar, we are now going to kick off the Q&A. So let's head over to the Q&A window, and I will be reading out some of your questions, and we will try to cover as many as possible in today's session, right? Okay, so I'm gonna start from the top. So Taiki, this is a question for you.
Yep.
How much time do you usually dedicate to prototyping in the design process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what it comes down to ultimately is how big the scope of the project is. For example, in this camera experience, this took us a couple of months. I can't remember exactly the first time we started just because there were a lot of iterations, but I wouldn't say there's a set start and end point until the project is finished, right? So on top of the fully fledged or the fully functioning prototype, you can also make the timing-based prototypes to your advantage as well. So whether it be edge cases or maybe specific edge cases or anything on top of that, you could always be in ProtoPie creating these experiences. And I always like to say a prototype or even a time-based prototype is much better than even 10, 20 static screens that you have to explain what's happening. So I wouldn't say there's necessarily a set amount of time. I am in ProtoPie from the start of it and make sure that I'm in until the end of the project.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will mark this question answered in. Okay, so someone else is asking, I'm not sure if you can answer that, but we will just try. So how fast can you create an equivalent prototype in ProtoPie to a typical one in Figma? If you have any experience on that.
I'm assuming you're talking about just the camera experience maybe, but I don't know if Figma allows you to get to the level of advanced tools to be able to imitate and create what I did in ProtoPie. For example, the formula just to start off with was to detect where the level of your touch was. And I'm not sure if I've found a way to do that in Figma. And so I always push a lot of my peers to try and get into ProtoPie and get out of Figma, just because it does allow you, even if you're not making the most advanced of prototypes, it still provides a level of fidelity that you can't get in Figma, whether it be transitions or animations or specific movements. I hope I answered your question there, but please let me know if I did.
Short answer, you could, but it's a difference of fidelity at the end of the day. Thank you. Okay, then. This is a question I'm also curious to hear, what was your team's reaction? Because I know I think you introduced ProtoPie to your team. How did they react?
I think with any new software, there comes a level of intimidation, and kind of even I was scared to go into ProtoPie just because of it's something new, right? It's something that you don't recognize at the start of the day, but as you sort of play around and find out these triggers and responses and formulas of variables, whatever it may be, you start to understand that there's a lot of different similarities between the design softwares that you use, whether it be Figma, whether it be InVision, whether it be whatever it is that you've used in the past. There's a lot of similarities that you can apply these concepts to. In terms of the team's reaction, I think that most people understood there was a need for a prototyping tool, or a more advanced prototyping tool. At least we had a variety of different click-through prototypes that people would make, I think, in terms of Figma, just tap this button, you would go here, tap this button, you would go here, stuff like that. But I think it's all positive reaction when you can confidently show how this leverages your design process, how this leverages the end goal and the stakeholders, and trying to get buy-in there.
Awesome. I think this also covers one question, which is below, about how you convince your executives, your managers, to get approval for it. But I think your answer pretty much answers that. Okay, then. One other question was, let's see. So this we covered. This is an interesting one. At Fetch, do you use the team library features to keep all the components organized in an interactive design system?
That's a very good question. I've been telling myself that I'll make a library in ProtoPie for a while now. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. That is a goal of mine sometime throughout this year. I think there's many features or many components that are reused throughout prototypes and ProtoPie within our team. So that's something I haven't gotten around to. but it is definitely something I want to do and will be beneficial. And I know that for a fact, just to be able to reuse, for example, reuse the experience of going through the camera. That's something that you don't want to build from scratch every time. It doesn't make sense to be able to have a feature or have a component library that includes that would be amazing. Great question.
So I hope you took some notes. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, then we have many questions around how you adapt ProtoPie, how your workflow was before ProtoPie. So another question was, what was your workflow like before ProtoPie?
Yeah, I think at the base of it all, it was a lot of click-throughs. When I first got into the world of prototyping, I was fascinated by click-throughs, right? So just being able to interact with something instead of static screens where you show your stakeholder, you go from this screen to this screen to this screen to this screen. You can actually interact with it. And that brings another level of sort of fidelity, like I said, and another level of emotion. I oftentimes think about prototyping as a make or break it tool. Like if you have a product that doesn't transition the right way, or there's something off about the transition, that could make or break the product that you have. And I'm a firm believer in that. And so I think before that process, I just had click-throughs. I would try and get as detailed as I could in Figma, but it was just not providing the level of advanced just fidelity, I guess I keep saying that, but advanced fidelity that I wanted. So it was tougher to get buy-in. I got distracted a lot with, what about this edge case? What about this edge case? What would happen here? And like I said previously, it was a little bit sporadic. But once ProtoPie came into the picture, a lot of those pains were solved for myself. And just being able to show stakeholders the end result of what I was envisioning helped so much.
Thank you so much, Taiki. Okay, then let's switch over to maybe user testing. Let's see. What is the process for user testing at Fetch currently? And do you have access to ProtoPie's user testing feature? That I don't think you Fetch. I don't think, because that's for our enterprise users. And yeah, but can you walk us a little bit through the user testing process?
Yeah, absolutely. Similar to what I showed and explained about the camera, I think a lot of Fetch's philosophy is to do testing very quickly and user testing very quickly, right? The level of feedback that you're going to get with something that's clickable, something that a new user may look at, is far different than anybody else can give you through static screens. But once we have a good enough and a prototype that has sort of this level of production-like qualities to it, we'll go to users, whoever it is. We may go to a small percentage of users of our user base, actually. So that once the development is built out to a point where we feel comfortable doing that. Or we may just go sort of on the side and grab users just in the wild, is what we like to call it, and ask them, what would you do if you were shown the screen? What would be your next step? What are you thinking? And then, like I said, just testing individually as well. I oftentimes ask my mom, do you think this works? What do you think about this? And she'll tell me if she doesn't like it or if she loves it. But informal testing like that is a huge part of that process as well. But yeah, there's specific levels to it, I guess you could say.
Great. So Mosen and Katrina, you had similar questions about how the user testing is conducted. So I think Taiki graciously covered all that. So I'm also going to mark these questions done. Okay, then. Okay, this is another good one. What features do you want to see in ProtoPie Studio to move your vision and prototyping needs further?
Yeah, absolutely. I think two things come to mind. One of them is a very grand idea. The second one is more so related to my day-to-day work with the camera. The grand idea, I would love at some point to be able to see a Figma-like, I guess, real-time collaboration feature. There's times when you pair with other designers, or I pair with my coworkers who are extremely talented, and they are able to give me an idea that I was stuck on in an instant, right? Just because we're able to see the same file, go through these cursors, or go follow each other's cursors together on the screen. And I think there's moments in time where I wish we could do that in ProtoPie as well. So without having to go on Zoom, share your screen, or have them take over or anything like that, if we were in the same area, being able to look at the same triggers, the same responses, and debug together, maybe even, I think that would be an extremely, extremely helpful tool. There was a moment recently, actually, where I paired with another designer, shout out to Rolf, to try and figure out something that I've stuck on forever. And just being able to figure that, I was able to get sort of his expertise and his background and find a solution together, which helped a ton. And so that kind of reminded me of a collaboration feature in ProtoPie. The next one is a little more specific to the camera. I think I've had the privilege of being able to work on the camera for a little bit, and that I don't know if every single designer gets to do so, but I think saving specific photos with the camera may be something that would be super helpful, maybe just locally or something like that on the device. But having this level of recording, or maybe taking the photo and being able to save that just for a little bit, just because that is a lot of what the camera is for, right? You're not going to open up the camera to or in most cases, you want to open up the camera just to leave it immediately, and unless you're using a QR code or something like that. But either you're taking a video, taking a photo, stuff like that. And so being able to save would be awesome.
Awesome. John, I hope that answers your question. And team, yeah, let's take notes from Taiki. Okay, we cover user testing, we cover how you adopted ProtoPie. I think there's 2 questions about how you do handoff and how you work with your engineers. So John is asking, how does prototyping work with engineers? Do they work to match the prototype, or do you work within their scope? Like what's doable quickly, or what's really custom and would take time?
Yeah, I think it depends on the situation as well. Like I said, we work together throughout the whole thing. We try and stay in contact and make sure to sync basically every day to try and figure out what's working, what are you working on, what am I working on, does this look good, does this look bad. An extremely talented designer that's part of Fetch, Emily, shout out Emily, it introduced sort of a QA, a design QA process as well, where we check to make sure that the builds that the developers are making are what we expect them to be as well. And so going from the prototype or the video that you got from the prototype, maybe even to the developer working on and trying to match that as much as they can, collaborating there. And then on top of that, once they do have a development build and it ready, they sort of share that out to the team, to other stakeholders, to try and figure out, is this what we expected? Is everything behaving the way we want it to? And then we go from there. So that's sort of what our process looks like so far. It's worked great. There's times when we do have to go, we do have to leverage speed over maybe more of a complicated custom asset, or vice versa. But again, we have super talented developers, we have super talented designers, product managers on the team. So they help save me every once in a while too. So shout out to them.
Yeah, teamwork makes the dream work.
Exactly.
Thank you, Taiki. We have a question about whether you, Taiki, do you have a coding background, or can you create these advanced prototypes as a designer without coding?
I think I have a very weak background in coding. I studied it a little bit in college. I have tried to teach myself here and there throughout my time, and just whether it be YouTube videos or trying things on my own. But I would say I have a strong coding background. And you can absolutely make these advanced prototypes without having to code. You could actually do that in ProtoPie, which is what I did. There's no need to know these high levels of coding. There comes a point when you will probably have to hand it off to a designer, but that's where their expertise comes in, and hopefully they explain to you the routes and sort of the pros and cons of each decision that you make. But no, to answer your question, I do not have a coding background, or a good one at least.
Thank you. So no coding background, but you don't need coding to work with ProtoPie. Thank you. Okay, then let's see. many people are curious about the whole like adoption process and about how you made ProtoPie work within a team. So let's see. Yeah, are several designers at Fetch using ProtoPie? How do your colleagues use it? In my company, it's only me, and it's difficult to get others on board.
Yeah, absolutely. Other designers are in ProtoPie. There comes a point where, I mean, obviously every other designer here at Fetch works on Innovate type projects as well, where they do have to convey their story. They have to convey what they're trying to do with their designs to other stakeholders and get that approval. And so there comes a point where they have to transition from Figma to ProtoPie, right? So there's plenty of designers in there. We all go back and forth on what's working, what's not, and figuring out how to debug something, maybe even. Sorry, there's a second part. How do you always use it? I would say, I mean, the biggest part of that is just getting people in it, right? I think that's the biggest barrier as of today, just figuring out how to get users to start using it at your company, and then leveraging the advanced tools as well. Like tracking a user's finger is nearly impossible in Figma, or at least at the fidelity of ProtoPie, like I said. And so being able to show those specific aspects of ProtoPie will definitely help, I think, in my opinion.
Right. And also related to that, like, how did you get the budget to pay for it? And how did you make your case? Like, how did you show your executives, like, the value? Like, how did you convince them to, kind of?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can get into specifics about budget questions, just because that I don't know if that's my decision per se, but all I did was go to my manager. We knew we had a need for a prototyping tool on top of Figma. That was more than click-throughs. But there was a conversation about just what ProtoPie provides, probably how much it was at that point in time, and then how we can leverage it to show these specific projects coming up, and make sure that we could showcase that in our design critiques, or just syncs, or whatever, stand-ups, whatever it may be. Just using it as much as you can, and getting familiar with it as much as you can.
Thank you, Taiki. I'm going to mark this down as well. And also related to, so you mentioned, yeah, you don't really have a coding background, but how did you like learn ProtoPie to get to your level from today? Was there any learning resources you can recommend besides what we already provide?
Yeah, ProtoPie has plenty of videos on their YouTube channel about from beginner levels to medium levels to advanced levels of how to use ProtoPie. They do a really great job. I also use a lot of their blog articles in terms of what each trigger does, what each variable does, what each response does, everything like that. And then on top of that, trying to mimic what people do online as well, whether it be YouTube videos and tutorials through there. I know ProtoPie posted the best of, I think, 2022 prototypes as well. So, and you can download those and see how they made things, how they use those interactions. And so there's plenty of ways to see what other people are doing. There's plenty of advanced prototypers out there as well. So using that, seeing how they did things, learning from them, and trying to apply it in your day-to-day, I think, is the best way that I learned, and the quickest way that I learned.
Thank you. I hope this answers your question. Another question was, and this is a short one, I guess it's a yes or no. Have you tried origami before ProtoPie?
I have not. Oh, sorry. Is there still more to that question?
And if you did, if you felt that it was easier than ProtoPie?
Yeah, I have not used origami before. I think I would love to get into it at some point. As of right now, I think there's plenty of ways in ProtoPie to create a production-like experience, or at least close enough to convey in design critiques, whatever it may be. I do know that the barrier to entry for origami is even harder than ProtoPie, or it seems more intimidating. So I'll have to see what that's like, but no, I have not, unfortunately. Sorry, I can't answer your question.
Thank you, Katrina. So yeah, I hope this covers it. We have time for, let's say, one more question. And I think this is also, so it's from Rebecca Chen, and it's my assumption that it's also related to handoff. would you be able to talk through an example of storytelling where you give a real life example to express how you'd like a feature to work?
I mean, I think I'll just go back to the experience that I showed in this presentation too. Like, there's a specific level of sort of touch and feel and emotion that comes along with scooping a goldfish, right? If you've ever tried it before, or even trying to grab a goldfish, there's levels of like, there's levels of weight, there's levels of kind of the fish jumping around maybe, or a level of slime maybe, depending on where you're at and whatever it is, that you cannot convey at the same time on a screen. But being able to sort of grab that concept and show it or explain it to a stakeholder, to a user that's going to use it, will start to build that picture in their head, even if you've never done that before. That's something that is available to them in their brain, and they're able to think about, they're able to maybe even touch, just go through that experience themselves. And so I'm just going to go back to that previous example of goldfish scooping, something that I've done in my childhood, and relate it to that camera experience that I created, that we all created at Fetch.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. So thank you for all the great questions. I hope, you learned a lot from this Q&A session. We will have to move on because we're approaching the end of today's webinar. Thank you, Taiki. And if you have further questions, Taiki offered you can reach out to him on his LinkedIn. Taiki, maybe you can drop your URL in the chat box so you can connect with him there. Okay, then. Now let's start wrapping up. So before we wrap up, we would like to show our appreciation for your time today and for your participation in this webinar. And we're offering you a 30% off discount on the first billing period of our monthly and yearly pro plans. So use this code ProtoPie Webinar 23 to get your discount. Rebecca will post it in the chat. Okay, then. So today's webinar is the first of many to come this year. Our next webinar is with Ambition. Ambition is a Mercedes-Benz software subsidiary, and they will be talking to us about how they prototype the whole in-car experience, the Mercedes-Me app at Mercedes. So make sure to register via the link in the chat, and I hope to see you there. So stay excited. And there's two more things that I would like to cover before we say goodbye. The first one is that we migrated our ProtoPioneers home. ProtoPioneers is our community. We migrated from Slack to Circle. So please make sure to join our community. It's a great place to change ideas, to connect with like-minded professionals, ProtoPie enthusiasts like you, and to just get help. We're always there. We're active. So this is the greatest place that I would recommend you to join if you have questions with your pies or about prototyping in general or design. And the second one is that we have a bento profile. So basically, if you go to bento.me/protopie, you can get all our socials, the links from there, and you can stay updated with our releases, our updates. So please, we would like to stay connected and to create a engaging and helping community of protopying enthusiasts. So check out bento.me/protopie. Okay, then. Thank you for taking part in today's webinar. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you found it engaging and informative. I'd like to thank Taiki for participating, and as always, thank you to my team for being helpful and supportive. And I really hope I will see you next time. The session has been recorded, and we will share it with you in the upcoming days. So keep an eye on that. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.